Hello and welcome to another exciting episode of Pittsburgh Sports Memories. I'm your co-host Steve Wirt, and as usual, I'm joined by.
Tim Hannon.
So, Tim, what are your thoughts and feelings on public transportation?
I'm not a fan.
You're not a fan. You would never ride the bus.
I have ridden the bus. I used to ride the bus back when I was going to grad school at Pitt, and it's not an experience I enjoyed.
Would you ride the bus to all the way to a Super Bowl win?
That I would consider.
Well, as you can tell, today we're going to be talking about one Hall of Fame career running back that is Jerome Bettis. He kind of really fit in well with Pittsburgh and just like personified like what the city likes, like smash mouth, hard nosed football, tough, and very gregarious, like friendly kind of guy. And just eventually, he fit so much into the city and the Steelers that he just kind of became like a almost like synonymous. When you mention Jerome Bettis, you think of the Steelers. When you say the Steelers, you probably think of mostly the Super Bowls, but you probably think of Jerome Bettis too, I would think. And it came off in a storybook ending, of course, as Super Bowl 40, and so we'll kind of relive all that and pray our little tribute here to one Mr. Jerome Bettis. Hey Tim, did you know Jerome grew up in Detroit?
Well, I wish somebody would have told us about that at some point because it was
right.
never mentioned during his career.
At
Certainly,
all.
when they played that Super Bowl in Detroit, no one ever brought it up either.
Yeah, so he definitely grew up in Detroit, but fun fact, he has a extreme love of bowling, and I think that's pretty fairly well known. But did you know he has a perfect game under his belt? He bowled a 300.
That's impressive. Steve, what's the closest you ever got to a 300? Or what's your high score for bowling? I think mine, I've cracked 100 before, and that's my biggest
I think my highest score is like 175.
That's impressive. That's really good.
Why? I mean, consider I used to bowl in like a fun league. Like it wasn't like a super competitive league. We just did it for fun, but it was like Sunday evenings, and it just got old after everybody quit. Yeah, it was like, yeah, we're done. But I can't make the ball curve like the pros. You ever see like the pros, like it goes to like the gutter and then curves in to what they call the pocket. But I can't. I can throw an okay straight ball. I'm okay with that. But Jerome Bettis is a very good bowler. Now I don't know if he's good enough to be professional, although they said he was being recruited, I guess, as a bowler to some schools. He was so good at it. But,
Oh, wow.
thankfully for all of us, and he had decided to go to Notre Dame as a running back. And he was part of that great backfield with Ricky Watters and Dorsey Levens, both of which went on to have good NFL careers. He played for the late Lou Holtz, and I think he really liked Lou Holtz. Most of his players did. So after a great career at Notre Dame, he ends up being picked 10th overall by the Los Angeles Rams. Yeah, this gets confusing with all the team decided to move to St. Louis for a short spell and then move back to Los Angeles just because why not? He at the time when he actually got a really good coach for him. It was a guy named Chuck Knox. Do you remember Chuck Knox at all, Tim?
I do. He coached the Seahawks for a lot of years in the 80s.
He had
And
Kurt Warner, actually, the running back Kurt
right,
Warner.
right,
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah.
And that was kind of his
To
style,
further
wasn't it?
muddy the waters. Yeah.
And that was kind of his style of coaching, right? Where like run first,
Yeah.
Knox. Yeah.
Yeah, because like NFL films, you ever watch the NFL films like little, like what would you call them, like season, like
Yearbooks. They
rehash?
call them
Yeah,
yearbooks. Yeah.
yeah. It'd be like ground chuck, and yeah, I think they used that twice. So. But he had a great first season. He had over 1,429 yards rushing, and actually, I remember this. They went to the West Coast because the Steelers never did well. I remember going to the West Coast, and they lost fairly convincingly and gave up over 100 yards rushing to Jerome Bettis. And what was the old stadium the Rams used to play in? Like it was like in Anaheim, wasn't it, or something? because they didn't
Yeah, it
they
was
didn't play in the Coliseum back then.
correct, and it wasn't the Rose Bowl.
Yeah,
It was
I can't
the
remember.
same stadium that I think the Angels played in. I
I
think,
think you're right. Yeah, yeah,
but I don't remember the name of it. You're right. It was in Anaheim, and
yeah.
that game was 27-0, if I remember correctly. It was a
Hmm.
shutout, and Bettis just ran all over, and that's when the Steelers had a really good defense.
Yeah, no, the defense wasn't necessarily bad, but eesh, he smoked us. So now it fast forward a couple years. Ground Chuck is no longer grinding Chuck. He is just a average citizen, I guess. And in comes Rich Brooks, who is the new coach of the Rams. And so the Steelers at that point, this is 1995. Bam Morris decides that he doesn't like rushing, scoring touchdowns, rushing the ball. He'd rather do drug running. I don't know. Maybe it was his second career, but he gets busted with a large amount of pot, and he ends up going to jail. Actually, I think he just got off with a fine on that one. But then later in his a couple years later, he gets busted again with like a bunch of pot in his car. So that was on March 22nd, 1996. Bam Morris was released from jail. He had more than 6 pounds of marijuana in his trunk.
It's interesting the timing of that too, because uh, it the circumstances of Jerome Bettis coming to the Steelers is fully 100% dependent on that incident happening.
Mm-hmm.
Because Bam Morris was in his second year with the Steelers. I mean, they had no intent.
And he a pretty solid running back too.
He
Yeah.
was like you said, he was the leading rusher in the Super Bowl. He was going to be the running back of the future. They were kind of using him and Eric Pegram together, and there was definitely no intent of going out and trading for some other running back because you had Bam Morris, and that that incident happening really changes the course of Jerome Bettis' career and the course of franchise history for the Steelers.
Yeah, so like I aforementioned, Rich Brooks is the coach, and Jerome Bettis had a falling out with Coach Rich Brooks, which I always thought, like, I don't know, I always thought Bettis like kind of got along with most of the coaching and players he played with. So I don't know. Jerome credited it to I guess there was some sort of they were supposed to come in early for a coaching session for training camp in LA, and the all the veterans agreed to it, and Jerome himself had agreed to it, but the his contract wasn't settled, so he had to hold out, or it was either injury or some contract situation, and Rich Brooks thought that he had lied to him, so he already got off on a bad start. And then Rich Brooks wanted to move him to fullback, even though they already had Tim Lester. And it was basically Rich Brooks was trying to stick it to Jerome Bettis.
People don't remember how poorly managed of a franchise the Rams were at that point. They were
Yeah, they were not well. Well, I think Stan Kroenke still owns them back then.
no, that was Georgia Frontiere owned
Oh,
them
was
at
it
the
still
time.
him? Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, because
Kroenke was there, but I think he was like a minority owner or something. Or
her husband had died like
that was
20
the
years
old guy
before
that
that,
owned the
Rosenblum,
yeah, Rosenblum owned the
and he died
Colts.
under semi mysterious
Heart
circumstances.
attack in a pool. I mean,
Well, yeah, I mean, again, the conspiracy theories abound that either way, she inherits the team, she
right.
moves it to St. Louis, and it was a dumpster fire for a lot of years. They were the worst team of the '90s for the entire '90s until until that year where Dick Vermeil came and Kurt Warner and all that stuff happened. But they were a dumpster fire, and Rich Brooks was
Part of the dumpster fire
part
for
of the
sure.
dumpster fire, to say it
Well,
nicely.
this is probably like his most egregious mistake, I would say, running off Jerome Bettis.
Yes.
Like, so they trade Jerome Bettis to Pittsburgh in a third round pick, which is 72nd overall, and the Steelers used that to select Steve Conley, who they ended up releasing a couple years later. And then they also, with their first pick that year, do you remember who they picked, Tim?
The Rams?
Well, I know who the Rams picked. That's even worse. We'll get to It's actually worse. The Steelers picked somebody that's bad, but in a different way.
Yeah, yeah. So the Steelers picked Jermaine Stevens, who was a tackle from North Carolina A&T, I think is
Yeah.
the school he went to, and he was a project. They
Yeah.
thought they needed a tackle, but not immediately. They could groom this guy for like, 2 seasons later. And at the time, I remember distinctly in that draft, my brother really wanted the Steelers to take Mike Allstat.
Yeah, he would have been available later in the draft anyway. So
Yeah,
they
yeah.
still could have picked Stevens and then gotten Mike Allstott. And I wonder, I get that. I bet that would have still worked out. I don't know. Mike Allstott isn't as good as Bettis. I don't know. Mike Allstott was pretty good though.
Yeah, and when they traded for Bettis, that made, drafting Allstat wouldn't have made any sense at that point. But that's who a lot of people were thinking, because again, Van Morris was gone. They needed that kind of like big bruiser running back.
Mhm.
But they opted to make the trade for Bettis. And then, do you want to talk about, Steve, who the Rams then took
Yeah.
to
Well,
replace Bettis?
with the second pick, they select Ernie Conwell, and with a fourth pick they got in '97, they trade to the Dolphins, and they eventually get Ryan Tucker. But the big running back that they picked to replace Jerome Bettis is, I don't know why, if you already have a problem with Jerome Bettis, who seems like pretty clean cut and not terribly hard to get along with. I mean, more than any other player. Like, why do you go out and sign Lawrence Phillips from Nebraska, who at Nebraska had already had like behavior problems? Like Tom Osborne had, didn't he sit out like a one of the bowl games or something? Or like he had a lot, he was in trouble at Nebraska, and that's why like he fell to the Rams at, I forget what pick, but it wasn't like it was a top 10 pick, but he kind of
Because
fell.
and the answer to that question is because he was that talented. Like at
Yeah.
Nebraska had won the national championship 3 months before that,
Mm-hmm.
and they had Tommy Frazier was their quarterback, but Lawrence Phillips was the star of that team, and he was that good. And so that was the era. Well, I guess it still happens today, but especially back then, that was the era where just teams talked themselves into, because that was the same draft where Keyshawn Johnson, I think, was the number one overall pick.
Yes, and by the way, Ohio, there was a competition for getting Bettis, the Tennessee whatever the Titans, wherever they were at that point, Oiler, Houston, Nashville, Memphis, wherever the heck they were looking to sign Jerome Bettis, to trade for Jerome Bettis, but they ended up picking Eddie George with their first round draft pick. So.
But the point being that this teams thought that they could, okay, so these guys have behavioral problems, but we can turn them around and we can make them good. And it was just typical of, again, like I said, how the Rams were run at that time. And it turned into an absolute, like you said, that them trading Bettis so that they could go out and draft Lawrence Phillips. I think he lasted maybe 2 years with the Rams.
Yeah, he ended up dying in prison.
Yes. Yeah. Very, very sad story, but what a mistake that was.
The deal, the Steelers got Jerome Bettis and they got the Rams' third round pick in the '96 draft. The Steelers sent the Rams the second round pick in '96 and the fourth round pick in '97, thus the pick of Ernie Conwell. So they really didn't give up much of anything. Ed Bouchette called it a major trade that cost them virtually nothing on what they will get on what will go down as one of their biggest draft days in history. Nothing else. He actually comments on the size of the players, because Jermaine Stevens was 335 pounds and Jerome Bettis was 250 pounds. So they, basically drafted like a half a ton of human beings.
And at the time, that was also right after Neil O'Donnell had left in free agency. So
Yeah.
the Steelers were trying to, they knew that they weren't quite sure who was going to play quarterback. So I think the whole point of that draft was, no matter who plays quarterback, we're going to have a solid running game, right? We're going to have the big
Yeah.
bruiser back. We're going to have this big offensive lineman tackle. That was really seemed to be the theme there, is if we don't have a quarterback, then we're going to build up a running game.
So, like I said, Bettis had fallen out of favor with Rich Rooks due to the holding out for 2 weeks from the training camp from the year before. Bob Smizek chimes in and says, "Is Jerome Bettis a malcontent, overweight, practically over the hill running back whose career is on such a runaway downhill course that St. Louis Rams unloaded the former first round draft choice? Or is he a misunderstood young man with the character of a saint who still has the talent of a Pro Bowl, who was badly used by his former team and is eager and ready to please his newest employer, which as of yesterday is the Steelers?" He does say the definitive answer on Bettis is not out, not in yet. So
Yeah, I was gonna say that's a nice journalistic trick that columnists do. You don't say he was a malcontent. You ask the question, is he a malcontent? Is he always hurt? I mean, time will tell. So that way, you don't have to be proven wrong later.
yeah, you don't make a statement.
Yeah.
Did you know Jerome Bettis did not have the bus nickname yet? He was
Oh,
remember,
really? I
yeah, he
didn't
was
know
called
that.
the Battering Ram, and
Oh,
I remember that. I remember that from sport like NFL Prime. Yeah, he was a Battering Ram. They used to call him that. But then the first preseason, they're playing Green Bay, and Jay Hayes, who was a coach, had a brother that was a tight end named Jonathan Hayes, and they called him Bussy, and that was his nickname from Notre Dame. And Myron Cope, being Myron Cope, had overheard this and decided to go on the radio and said, "Hey, look at that bus go!" And he was calling him Bus during the preseason game. And from there on in, thanks to Myron Cope, he was known as Jerome Bettis, the Bus.
wow. I did not know that. That's pretty cool.
And it didn't enhance Tim's love of public transportation at all, apparently.
No.
Anyway, low times. He had one off the field issue ever. Somebody made up a fake claim about him, and it was like literally, it was in 2002, and like it was ended up being like a total scam, like by this lady's uncle, like to try and extort. Was the guy was a professor somewhere? Was that at Penn State or?
It sure was.
Hey, wow, another
We
check.
are good at making stuff up.
Yeah, like Bettis totally cooperated with the police. Ended up taking a lie detector past everything, and like nothing ever became of it because there was nothing to make anything of.
Do you
So
remember how the guy got caught, Steve?
he was bragging in a bar, I think, that he was
No,
doing
no, it
it.
was
Or
even better than that.
was it in class?
It was
Yeah,
to his students.
yeah.
He literally bragged to his students that he was going to set up Jerome Bettis. That guy, genius, man. Criminal
Wow.
mastermind, that guy.
Yeah, I can't see why he was outwitted by Jerome
Yeah,
Bettis.
yeah.
Uh, so let's talk about injuries, Tim. Injuries are part of the game. And in 2000, Bettis was he claims that he covered up an injury from the season before because he had went to the doctor before the season, like I guess a non-Steeler doctor, and his knee was messed up. And then he was like, "Well, I'm gonna try and play on it." And like he went and like the first play, like he said the second day of practice, like they finally ran like a real play, and he ran into the line and was like, "Oh, my knee." And it was yeah. I don't know why he even did that because I don't think was he really that afraid that they were going to cut him.
Well,
I know this is like this is 2000, so he was getting kind of towards, but he still had good years
so
even after that.
so so if you remember the context of that, so number one, he did have a bum knee. It was, but the timing of it, like you said, it was he pretended like it happened on that play when it really had happened outside of
Like
that
yeah,
play.
like the year before even or
Right,
something. And he
right.
ended up playing the rest of that season on one leg and had surgery after that off season. So I don't know why wouldn't the Steelers just have let him? I don't know.
If you remember the context of that 2000 season, we did an episode on that. That was Tom Donahoe. Tom Donahoe, the general manager, they had mutually kind of parted ways with Tom Donahoe. Bill Cowher had almost left. That was like the him
Yeah,
or me thing with Tom Donahoe. And the team had been really bad in 98, really, really bad in 99. And I think that at the time, some people thought it was a rebuild. They had gone out and got a new quarterback that year. the immortal Kent Graham,
Yeah, that's what I
and
thought. Yeah.
and they had Richard Huntley, who actually had a really good season in '99, as bad as they were. And so I think Bettis probably thought,
They're replacing me with this younger, cheaper guy, and
yeah, yeah,
yeah,
and they were going to replace Cordell, they were going to replace Bettis, they were going to, again, they were kind of rebuilding a little bit, and so his best days might have been behind him at that point. I think that's probably what he thought, and honestly, I think that's what a lot of us as fans thought, because by that point, 2000, Steve, that would have been his. He started in '93. That would have been his eighth season,
yeah, 8 years
and
in the league.
that's a
Yeah,
lot for a running
running
back.
back, especially
So
like a big bruising running back.
yes, yeah,
Yeah, so so I mean, whatever. It's kind of like that's really the only two like off the field scandals, and they're really like by today's standards quite tame. I mean, there's no compared to some of the other stuff that goes on in the NFL in general, and even with the Steelers in particular. I mean, wow, this the Jerome Bettis really was never a troublemaker.
no, not at all.
Didn't you say he had a book and you like it was like there was just he tried to like act like having the stuff book like, oh yeah, I did it, and it was like, yeah, there's nothing there.
Yeah, I mean, he talked about the faking, the again, not faking an injury, but faking the timing of an injury. That was probably the biggest quote unquote scandal. He talked about yeah, I think he said like he thought Cordell Stewart got a raw deal from the Steelers. I mean, it wasn't anything that was like hard hitting, but that's Bettis's personality is not. He was never going to be like Ryan Clark
No,
is on ESPN. You know what I mean? That's
he's
not
like a
his.
jovial kind of nice guy. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's class A. Yeah. So, let's flash back to 1998 since we're considering there's still low moments. At least this one's on the field, and it actually led to an NFL rule change, Tim. So it's Thanksgiving in 1998. While we're all finishing our turkey, the Steelers have managed to go into overtime against the Detroit Lions and Charlie Batch. Here's the coin toss with Phil Luckett and Jerome Bettis. Let's see what happens next.
We'll have a toss to determine who receives, who will call it from Pittsburgh. Number 36, call it plays in the air. Heads is the call. He said heads. It is a tails.
Oh, I believe he said tails. He did.
You want to take the ball?
Look at Jerome Bettis. He's still, what's going on?
You're changing the head. Which way you want to go?
Oh, man.
Detroit has won the toss. We'll receive.
Wow, how can Phil Luckett screw that up, Tim? I don't know. I guess 30 years later, has your opinion changed? Because I know at the time I just was flabbergasted that I really thought Jerome Bettis had called tails, but I guess I've never heard a recording where he said head tails. But they keep saying like that's the story the NFL says, and maybe he said it, maybe I don't know.
Yeah, 30 years later, I still can't believe that he messed up the coin toss. I'm sorry. It's a coin toss. I don't know how you mess that up. It's
Do you hear him
coin
say
toss.
head tails?
I mean, I think that because
Now the Silverdome was loud back then. I will say that, but
yeah, I think because that's the story, you can hear that if you really try to hear it. You know what I mean? But I feel like if no one would have ever said that, and like show that somebody that has no context and ask them what they hear,
yeah,
I don't think they're going to hear that. Does that make sense?
yes, like somebody hearing for the first time that is objective, like just somebody
Yeah.
doesn't even care about football. They're like, yeah, that's tails.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
well, what it does do, it actually leads to a rule change, Tim. Because I don't. Why were they calling? I never understood. Why did they call the coin flip in the air?
Because you could influence the.
How? Like if I show you, oh, Tim, here's a head.
I know, but that was the idea. The idea was there's no way you could influence it. Maybe you could hold it, head side up, and maybe you could flip it a certain way so it landed. It was supposed to take
like make it more
if
fair.
you call it in the air, then gravity is the only thing that's controlling whether it's heads or tails. If you call it while it's in the guy's hand, then the motion of the guy's hand can technically have some kind of control over whether it's heads or tails. That was the idea behind it.
What if it hits a counter on the way down? Would that be interference, like Seinfeld?
I think it doesn't count at that point, if I remember the Seinfeld rule correctly.
Yeah.
But like to your point, the you can't really control it with your hand either. It was overthinking it a little bit, and the flip side of that, no pun intended, was that now, because you're calling it in the air, even though they had done thousands and thousands and thousands of coin tosses before this, including the one that gave the Steelers Terry Bradshaw. Right. No one had ever messed this up before, but on Thanksgiving Day, 1998, all of a sudden now it's a problem. So yeah, they had to change the rule.
And it just, I remember, I think it was Atlanta. One of the players came out with like, it had it on a piece of paper. It said heads. Like, they're like, yeah. So like they literally in season, I think it was an in season rule change, wasn't it?
I think it might have been.
I think it was.
Yeah.
So like they made it, and it just, okay, fine. There's no controversy now. Like you said heads. That's what you said. Yes, you agree to it. So you can't even like, because like when you watch that video, you can hear them arguing with like Bill Cowher and Carnell Lakes. Like he said, tails. That's what he said.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even matter anymore because they've changed up overtime so much. It's like pointless.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever. We could talk about overtime again, but we've talked about it so many times.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing, that game, again, the Steelers still could have played defense and they didn't.
Yeah.
So
they couldn't stop Charlie Batch. You can't stop Charlie Batch.
You can only join them.
Yeah.
Which is what they did eventually.
So moving on to like low points in Jerome Bettis' career. I'm sure Jerome is just listening to this podcast right now and loving this part of it. Jerome, you can fast forward a couple more minutes if you don't want to hear any more of this. Lack of success in the playoffs, Tim, and there really is something to this. In 2001, there's a divisional playoff game against the Ravens. Do you remember this? Like this was like, I remember this was like such a big game. Like it was probably almost bigger than the Super Bowl in 1995. I remember just like, oh my God, we can't lose to the Ravens in the playoffs, Tim. Oh man, this is horrible. And sure enough, they have Amos Zaraway, and they have a pretty good team. I think they were 13-3 that year. That was the year they were 13-3. And Jerome Bettis was actually hurt this time, and went to go get a numbing shot to play, and they hit the wrong part of the leg, and I think his whole leg went numb. So he could not play that game, but they did just fine. You know what the highlight of that divisional game against the Ravens was Dan Kreider flat pancaking Ray Lewis. And that's never on Ray Lewis's highlight film, is it? He got pancaked by a guy from New Hampshire.
Yes.
But the Steelers won. Amos Zaraway had a pretty good game, and mainly the Steelers won because, was it Elvis Gerbach?
Yes.
The quarterback for the Ravens. Come on. I don't think the Ravens were beating us with the Elvis Gerbach.
Yeah, that was the year after they had won the Super Bowl and decided that, thanks, but no thanks, Trent Dilfer. We'll get Elvis Gerbach instead. And honestly,
I mean, I think they weren't wrong. I just think they selected the wrong guy.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, it would be a great what if they would have just kept Dilfer. If that
I would have kept Dilfer and drafted somebody then, or tried to trade for like, I don't know. I don't know who was, but that didn't really happen back then. Like, or not.
Like I said, it would be an interesting what if. Does history turn out different if they keep Dilfer? Probably not.
I never thought Dilfer was anything more than mediocre. He was better than Elvis Gerbach. But Elvis Gerbach was okay in Kansas City, but he was never like great.
I mean, Dilfer, I think, yes, Dilfer was not great. He was a game manager. They won because they had that defense, but he got them through the playoff games, through the Super Bowl. I think he gets a little underrated. And like I said, it would just be an interesting what if. I'm not saying that they beat the Steelers in the playoffs.
He was smart enough not to throw interceptions, and when they needed a third down here and there, he could pick up enough of those to keep the defense fresh. So, and that's all that team really needed. So
yeah, but they lost to the Steelers, and like you said, the Bettis, that was like they came on the broadcast and said, "Hey, Jerome Bettis is out,"
and it was like a last minute. It was like, what?
Yes, yeah, and everybody's like, "Wait, what?" And that was, scary because you thought, oh no, we're not against that Ravens defense. But like you said, Zaraway did pretty good.
I'm gonna jump back in time, and maybe I'm being a little unfair to Jerome Bettis here because when I looked at the stats, he did have better stats than I remembered. The 97-98 AFC, so it would be the 98 AFC championship game, or 97, I don't know.
It would be 97, yeah.
Yeah, 97, because the next year it would have played the Jets in Mile High. Well, how do I remember that? The Broncos beat the Steelers 24-21. The Steelers lose. Bettis has 23 rushes for 123 yards. So I guess he didn't have a bad game. So maybe but I would still say this is a low point in his career because he didn't get to make the Super Bowl. It really wasn't his fault. This is kind of one of the few playoff games where he had a good game and the Steelers lost. Unfortunately, Terrell Davis had a better game with 26 rushes for 139 yards, and even more unfortunately for Jerome Bettis was Cordell Stewart threw 3 interceptions. And there was the key third down catch by Shannon Sharp and some pass interference calls that were a little dubious at the end of the half. But I don't know. How much do you? It's probably unfair to really fault Bettis in this one.
Oh yeah, that was a team loss. Cordell threw 2 of those 3 interceptions were in the end zone, in the Broncos end zone. So that
they could at least kick the field goal. You kick 2 field goals there, you win the game.
Yeah, so that was painful. The Shannon Sharp catch at the end, like you said, we had Levon Kirkland on the show, and he talked about how to this day he laments not being in there to cover Shannon Sharp. They had Jason Gilden covering Shannon Sharp, and that was Kirkland said he thought if he would have been in there, he would have been able to defend that pass. So there was just a bunch of just unfortunate things. Also, John Elway, you do have to give him credit as much.
He's a Hall of Fame quarterback for a reason,
and he made the plays in that game. He really did make plays in that game. That was like destiny that year. He was going to get to the Super Bowl. He was going to finally win it.
Or was it the NFL script?
Yeah, the NFL script. Please. So yeah, it was. Hey, the Denver was just better. They were just better.
Well, all I have to say, Tim, is this one's for John. So after that one was for John, we'll continue on the low moments, and they do get worse as we're getting progressively worse, Tim. The 2001 AFC Championship game against the Patriots. This one is Bettis' fault. 9 rushes for 8 yards. Come on, man. And this wasn't like one of those games, like the next game, I could give him a little more leeway. They were not down big in this game. They were in it the whole time, had a lead for a lot of the game. And it's just they were keyed on, stopping Jerome Bettis, and they weren't going to let Plexico Burress get many catches. And for some reason, Cordell just would not throw in the middle of the field. So, but Hines Ward still had a good game that day, but it just wasn't. And I think that was the game where I remember I said that Cordell will never be a winning quarterback in the NFL, just because he had the opportunity at the end of that game to drive them down and tie the game. I think it was a tie or win. I don't know, but he overthrew he badly threw an interception, overthrew a wide receiver, and then I think he did it again on the next drive. So that was kind of the end of Cordell's career.
It really was, and
because it was just so obvious that those guys, it wasn't like that. It was a great play by the defense. It's just they were wide open, and he just couldn't connect on them. So
yeah, I mean, and to be fair, again, I hate giving Bill Belichick credit, but the Patriots defense that year went on to, in the Super Bowl, stop the Rams, who were a much better offense than the Steelers.
Oh yeah.
And so they game planned the Steelers well. They shut down Bettis. The fact that they only gave him the ball 9 times, I don't know if that was the best game plan, but he had also been injured and out of the game, like you said, the week before against the Ravens. So maybe that was part of it.
Maybe there's some hangover. Yeah. I mean, the problem was they stacked the box and they put 2 guys on Plexico and just had Ty Law cover Hines Ward. And Hines Ward did have, I think, 100 yards receiving that game. But what you needed was a a tight end down the middle to really exploit that defense. And for whatever reason, the Steelers didn't have that answer that day. Plus, like the special teams,
Yeah, they gave up 2 special teams touchdowns in that game, which is to this day still unbelievable that they, in an AFC Championship game, they gave up 2 special teams touchdowns, but that's what happened.
Yeah. How about now? This is probably my worst memory. I think this is the worst loss for me as a Steeler fan. I don't know in Steeler history. This has got to be one of the worst losses in Steeler history. Outside, maybe the Browns game a couple years ago in the playoffs where they fumbled the snap early. But I think this one was worse because I felt this team was really destined. Like you talk about a team destined to win. So the 2004 AFC Championship game against the Patriots, there's been a lot talked about this game because there's a lot of off the field stuff that we're not sure what happened. But Jerome Bettis has 5 attempts for 16 yards. He does score a touchdown. And once again, Jerome was probably towards the end of his career here, and he definitely was hurt more often. But and they were down big. So I will kind of give Jerome a pass on this one because the score of the game and where he was in his career kind of dictated the way his carries and the game plan went. But I will fault him for this. There's a play early in the game, a 4th and 1, and they run the ball into the line and they get stuffed, and Bettis actually fumbles. And Mike Vrabel, ironically enough, the current coach of the New England Patriots, recovers that fumble. So there's a lot going on there.
Yeah, Bettis to this day thinks that they knew what play was coming.
The stolen signals.
Yeah.
If they knew what play was coming and you knew what play, like, why didn't you okay, we're going play action here. Like,
well, they didn't know that at the time. What he would say, and I think what some of the Steelers would say is they didn't realize that until a couple years later when the whole Spygate thing came out.
Well, bottom line is he was not very effective in the playoffs against the Patriots, Tim.
In that season, I mean,
they were 15-1. That team was so good. Freaking James Harrison was a backup on that team, Tim. And Willie Parker. Willie Parker was a backup, like a third string, like because they had Deuce Staley.
That was another. So just like Richard Huntley, just like Amos Zaraway, they had signed Deuce Staley to like supplant Bettis because it's like, okay, Bettis is now, he's officially done. He's definitely done. And Deuce Staley had a good first, I don't know, 5
he got hurt.
Season.
He got hurt in the Patriots game on Halloween because one of the Patriots, Teddy Bruschi, cheap shot at him in a pile.
And so the next week they're playing the undefeated Eagles at home. What ends up happening, so they have to start Bettis for the Eagles game, and Bettis hadn't started all year. Bettis was like the goal line back.
Yeah.
And I was at that game. I was in the parking lot with a guy that would invite us over to his tailgate parties, and he did not like Bettis. He's like, Bettis, I can't believe we have to start Bettis. This is going to be a disaster. And I said, I don't think so. I said Bettis is going to have 150 yards in this game. And I said it very, very facetiously. In a million years, I did not think Jerome Bettis was going to have 150 yards. Well, he ends up having 149 yards.
You should have bet on it, Tim.
Against the undefeated Eagles that year. So that was impressive because that's kind of the story of Bettis' career. Every time he got written off, whether it was by us or by somebody else, he always showed that he had plenty left in the tank.
That was a great game because we beat 2 undefeated teams in a row.
Yes.
We beat the Patriots and then the Eagles.
Yes.
So, and I remember Hines Ward's one touchdown where he jumps into the end zone. Like that was on the cover of Sports Illustrated and all that. That was a great game.
Yes.
Yeah. So we'll go to the darkest moments, Tim. I would say this is his darkest moment. And we can all know what this one is. That would be the fumble in 2005. He almost was Ernest Biner. He was this close to being Ernest Biner. Or who else is like, who's the guy who missed the field goal for Scott Norwood?
Bill
or
Buckner.
Mike Vanderjack later in this game.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like the Steelers stopped Peyton Manning twice after the NFL scripted that Peyton Manning and Tony Dungy was supposed to win, and took away an interception by Troy Polamalu. And I mean, he all he has to do is fall down, and the only reason they couldn't just kneel on the ball is because once again they had overturned that ridiculous interception, the interception that was by Polamalu that ended up not being by Polamalu. And all Bettis has to do is fall down 4 times into the line of scrimmage, and they probably win even with that, even with the timeouts. They kick a field goal or something. And boy, that was just it was just a shame. He turns sideways, and Nick Harper runs down the field, and Ben saves the day.
In one of our other episodes, Steve, we were listing we were trying to figure out the top 5 like most shocking things that happen in Pittsburgh sports, and I think we talked about like Roberto Clemente's plane crash and the 13-9 game. That fumble has to be up there because Jerome Bettis, it's like we're at the 1-yard line, the game's over.
He made me swear in front of my mother. I called him every name.
Well, at least you didn't have a heart attack like that guy down at Chipka's.
Yeah,
literally gave a guy a heart attack. But I mean, that was how shocking that was because it was Jerome Bettis. He was just going to plow his way into the end zone. Or like you said, honestly, it would have been even better had he got stuffed. It was first down. It's
I think there were, what was there, like a minute and some change, right? It was under 2 minutes. So you fall down 3 times, you kick the field goal, make it a 6-point game, kick off, and okay, now you got to score a touchdown.
The even better scenario would have been you stop him on first down, maybe even second down, make him use a timeout, and then you score the touchdown. And now it's like over because now it's a 2-score lead. There's just no way then you have a 10-point lead. But even if you score on first down with a 10-point lead, that means the Colts have to score, get an onside kick, and score again. Basically, he goes into the end zone there, whether it's first down or second down, it's over. And they were at the 1-yard line, and it's Jerome Bettis. He's done this 1,000 times in his career. You give him the ball in the 1-yard line, he just plows into the end zone. For him to get stopped would have been surprising. For him to fumble,
he had very few fumbles later.
It was like an out-of-body experience for me when I'm watching that on TV. I remember literally like laying on the floor of my parents' living room, like felt like I was not in my body. I couldn't believe it happened. I just couldn't believe it happened.
But what would be his legacy if Ben doesn't make that tackle, or if Mike Vanderjagt doesn't miss the field goal? Like,
can you imagine? Could you imagine?
I mean, he's Scott Norwood or Ernest Biner. I
think it's even worse than Ernest Biner because when Ernest Biner fumbled, the Browns were losing that game, and I think that was gonna tie it. But they Elway still would have had time to get the ball back. But they were losing. The Steelers were literally just trying to ice it. You know what it would have been more
Bill Buckner? I don't know.
No, Joe Fasarchuk.
Oh gosh. Oh wow.
Because the Giants, that game that was over, they were rolling the credits. People were leaving the stadium. Like the game was over because all you had to do was take a knee, and somehow they gave the game to the Eagles. That would have been the comparison, and that was like a regular season game in November. When I think the Giants stunk. This was a divisional playoff game. Yeah. So I don't know what the legacy would have been, Steve. What do you think? What do you like?
I think we wouldn't be doing a podcast right now about Jerome Bettis in a positive light.
And that's such a shame, isn't it? Like that one moment.
We would have had to be like, forgotten. He would have been like, forgotten heroes that you think are bad but aren't really bad. He probably wouldn't have. Yeah. I don't know if he makes it to the Hall of Fame, Tim.
You're right. I think it would have been. I think you're right. That would have been his, because that's kind of Ernest Biner's legacy. Like people.
But he won a Super Bowl with who? With
Washington.
Washington, yeah.
Well, and I think people over the years have. Well, that's another good point. That wasn't the last play of Ernest Biner's career. But I think people over the years have gone back and said, look, Ernest Biner was not only a really good running back, but in that game, the Browns wouldn't have even been in that position in that game had it not been for the heroics of Ernest Biner. So you got to cut Ernest Biner some slack. And I think that would have been the kind of stuff that we would have been talking about, to your point, Steve, like guys that you thought were were total, goats, but really are better than you thought. I think you're right. That is the legacy.
Goat, you mean people that aren't good?
Well, yeah, the old fashioned use of the word goat. Yes, I know it
Yeah,
means something different now.
Yeah. Well, off of all that horribleness, we'll go to the memorable moments, Tim. These are much more fun. He had 1,000-yard seasons. He had 6 of them, Tim. That's which, back then that was a lot of yards, because like it was only 14 or 16 game season, so it was a little tougher to get 1,000-yard seasons back then, and that was from 96 to 2001. His first 6 seasons, he had over 1,000 yards rushing.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive.
In 1997, he had 1,665 yards rushing, and that was his career best. And he only did it. He did that in 15 games. So,
wow.
This game I was at, the Bettis had 5 rushes for 1 yard and 3 touchdowns in a September 12th, 2004 Raiders game that the Steelers won against the Raiders. I think we should, I wish we could post a picture of this to our podcast somehow. Like the stat, I have the stats from the paper, and it's hilarious. It's like Staley, 24 for 91. Maddox has 3 rushes for 13. Veron Haynes has 1 for 2, and Bettis literally has 5 rushes for 1 yard, but he scored for 3 touchdowns.
Yeah. It's maybe the craziest stat line in Steelers history, and it's because they kept putting him in at the 1 yard line, because again, like we just were talking about,
he scored 3 of those against the Raiders, and it's you've done this all season. And he did that against, I think, Philadelphia too.
Yeah, but that was the only positive yardage he had, and then he lost some yards, so it ended up being 1 yard, 3 touchdowns. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, I mean, the guy averages more than a touchdown to foot, or whatever.
I love stats like that. There was a guy for I think the Giants in the 60s, who for the season had 1 reception for 111 yards. And so you're like, wait, how do you have 1 reception for 111 yards? It's because
he must have lost yardage somewhere.
No, it's because he caught a long pass, and then on another play, somebody lateraled him the ball.
Oh, geez.
So they count that as receiving yards, but he didn't catch the ball.
Jeez.
So yeah, I love goofy stats like that.
Speaks to your OCD, Tim.
It does. It does.
Let's go on. How about the revenge game against the Rams in 96? This was the year after you've been traded. Rich Brooks is in Three River Stadium with Stan Kroenke was actually at this game, the current owner of the Rams. I think he was like a minority or whatever. Bettis has 122 yards rushing and 2 TDs. He has a 50-yard run for a TD. That was kind of like him proving a point, because the Rams coaches, you're not a game breaker, you're just a plotter, you get a couple yards and nothing else. And he had that big 50-yard run to prove he could. Bettis actually gets mad at Bill Cowher. Like, if you watch the NFL highlight, like, Bill's quit hounding me. I'm going to tell your parents, we're going to have a parent teacher conference. This is about the rest of the season. We can't afford to get you hurt in a blowout. And it leads to the old "you're my man and this is your town" statement by Bill Cowher. I was not able to find audio of that, but you've heard it before.
I remember that, and that's Bettis. Bettis really wanted to stick it to the Rams, and I don't blame him.
And he did. 122 yards, 2 rushing touchdowns, and a 50-yard run. You're good. You've proven your point.
Yeah, I think he wanted to stick it to them even more.
I mean, sometimes what they say, the best revenge is living well. So
yeah, and he did, and again, that was maybe I want to say like October of that 96 season, and already by then, it was very apparent that the Rams had made a mistake and that the Steelers had won that trade by 2 miles, and that was halfway through this first season.
Okay, there's a game against Tampa. It seems like a random game, but I just remember this because Tampa's defense, we're going to stop the run. We're going to be champions, blah, blah, blah. Bettis totally lit them up for 46 yards. And that was like Warren Sapp and all them. So Yeah, for the game against Tampa in 2001, he had 17 rushes for 143 yards. So.
He also threw a touchdown pass in that game to Jeremy Tooman.
Yeah, that's right. He did. Yeah.
Yeah,
So.
that was the paper champions game. Remember, Lee Flowers called them paper champions.
Yeah, actually I have a quote. It says, Cowher made sure to tell his players that Sapp approval said the Steelers would not be able to run against the Buccaneers defense like they had against other teams. All the Steelers did was rush for 220 yards on 35 carries, their third 200-yard rushing game in a row. Do you remember this game? I think I remember this game more for where I watched it. I think I was in Miami at the time, and it was the Cardinals 20 and the Steelers 26 in 97. And like the Steelers, like I was in Miami, so the game I was trying to get this stupid Dolphins game over, and like people kept getting hurt, and I was like, "Come on, man! Like wrap this up here, wrap this up, Jimmy Johnson or whoever was the coach." And finally, they wrapped it up, and they're like, "Oh, we're taking you to bonus coverage of the Steelers and Cardinals," and I got to watch the final overtime drive. And do you remember that game at all, Tim?
Yeah, Jerome Bettis scores the touchdown in overtime.
Yeah, he basically like runs everybody over. 36 carries for 142 yards rushing.
Yeah. What I remember about that game is it's the game that convinced my dad to get the Sunday ticket from that was DirecTV had the Sunday ticket back then.
Oh yeah.
And it's because that was a late game. That was a 4:00 game because it was in Arizona. And the 1:00 game was, I want to say, Jacksonville and Baltimore, which mattered greatly to the Steelers because they were in a divisional race with Jacksonville that year. And so we wanted to see the end of Jaguars-Ravens to see if the Ravens, because rooting for the Ravens to win, we needed Jacksonville to lose. And they cut it off. They're like, "Oh, we have to go to the Steeler game because contractually we have to show this." And it wasn't even, it was like them going to like the announcers talking about the game because it wasn't even starting yet.
Oh my gosh.
And my dad was like, "That's it. I can't stand how they control what you can see." And he decided he was going to get the Sunday ticket. And the next season he got the Sunday ticket. So that's what I remember about that game.
Nice. I just remember watching it from a weird play. Like I didn't get to see much except for like the overtime. So, but hey, I got to see it. I know you remember this game distinctly. I don't know if we've ever talked about this game before. There was a Broncos game, 97. The Broncos came to Three River Stadium and the Steelers win 35-24. Bettis has 24 carries for 125 yards. This was a huge matchup at the time, because the Steelers and Broncos were kind of battling for the number one seed in the AFC. And the Broncos were a pretty good team. Like they had Terrell Davis. They would go on to win the Super Bowl that year. So this game's probably more known for Cordell. This was kind of like one of Cordell's best games as a Steeler. So unfortunately, he didn't save this for the AFC Championship game.
Yeah, that was a great game. Bettis was great in that game. Cordell Yancey Thigpen had a huge game in that one.
Yeah.
That's when you thought, like, man, this team might actually.
And you missed the game-winning drive. I remember that. Wasn't there like a fight in the stands, and you missed?
There was a fight in the stands. Yeah, that's right. I forgot about that. I was at that game, and there was a big fight right in our section. But it was a heck of a game for sure.
How about a playoff game against the Colts? It was in 96. Like that was probably like one of better. I don't know what. Do you think the 96 season was his best season? It might have been. The Colts lose 14 in the Colts score 14, Steelers score 42. Jim Harbaugh's at quarterback for the Colts. I think we had Mike Tomczak at this point. Neil O'Donnell had gone on to fame and fortune with the New York Jets, or not. The Colts had actually not won a game in Pittsburgh since the Don Shula Baltimore Colts era.
Wow.
At that point, it was a back and forth game early. I watched some of the highlights. Like there was like an interception by Tomczak that wasn't his fault. He literally hits I forget who one of our scrub tight ends back then, right in the chest, and he like bounces up, and the guy for the Colts grabs the pass. So it just like the Steelers take over at the beginning, the first drive of the third quarter of the second half, and they have like this 9-minute drive, and it's capped off with Bettis getting a 1-yard TD run. Hey, another 1-yard TD run. But unfortunately, and I do remember this now too, is remember Bettis got hurt during that game, and he actually hurt his groin. So I think that affected, because the next week against the Patriots, they didn't do very well, but they kind of got blown out. Like, I don't know how. I don't think Bettis played, or if he played, he didn't play very well.
Yeah, that was the Fog Bowl game that didn't turn out very well.
Yeah. Probably Jerome Bettis' most memorable and maybe one of his best performances was one of his final performances, and that would be the Bears game in 2005. The Steelers have this 3-game losing streak, and like what you said, everybody's writing off the Steelers. It's kind of like they took on the personality of Jerome Bettis. Like, everybody's writing us off. Nobody can count us in, and and it was so bad. The Steelers need to win the last 3 games. And then I forget, somebody else had the win for the Steelers to even get in the postseason. So even if they won their last 3, they could still be on the outside looking in with, I think they end up going 10-6 or
11-5.
11-5.
They still needed help.
That's right. They were 11-5. And that, like, I think I remember, like, before that last game against Detroit, ironically enough, like, they said there'd only been one other 11-5 team that had missed the playoffs, which was crazy. But the Bears game, the first half, the weather was kind of but then the snow comes in, and it's a Jerome Bettis kind of day. And there's a play where the Steelers are driving for a touchdown, and you've seen this play a million times. They give the ball to Jerome. He runs over Brian Urlacher and the safety and scores. And that's probably like the highlight of Jerome Bettis' career. Whenever he goes in the Hall of Fame, they show that run. And it really propels, like, that game. Like, they take over. And the Bears were pretty good that year. It wasn't like the Bears were a bad team. And, they beat the Bears handily. And really, really just that game, like, really just epitomizes Jerome Bettis in the snow, hard-nosed football, running over Pro Bowl linebackers. That was kind of Jerome Bettis' thing.
Brian Urlacher was the defensive player of the year that year.
Yeah.
I mean, he was, again, if folks don't remember how good Brian Urlacher was, he was so dominant. And Jerome Bettis is, at that point, like, 5-6 games away from retiring.
Yeah, it was the worst kept secret. Everybody was like, "Yeah, we know he's going to retire."
But I mean, Bettis was at the very, very end of his career. Brian Urlacher's in his absolute prime. For Bettis to run him over,
and I think that the safety was there too. Like,
it's really, honestly, like you said, Steve, I think it is the signature play of his career.
Yeah. And it played in a snowstorm. It just looks like football. There's like the snow's flying. It's the Bears and Steelers, like 2 hard-nosed teams. It just looks like football. Super Bowl 40, I don't want to call it like a bad game, but like he didn't really do much. He had 14 carries. He did have 14 carries for 43 yards. And he just kind of ends his career in Detroit. And it's this like fairy tale ending, but he really didn't do much in Super Bowl 40. It really was Willie Parker and the defense and Hines Ward that won that game, really, quite honestly.
It was. And that was Bettis' role at that point. He was really a backup to Parker at that point. But I think what people wouldn't remember, they run that trick play to the touchdown that Antoine Randall threw to Hines Ward. They make Seattle punt. And it was 21-10 at that point. And there were still, I want to say, like 8 minutes left in the game. And the Steelers had a drive where they chewed up a bunch of the clock.
Yeah, and that's where he got all his yards. That was that drive, yeah.
Right. And so that would never show up on the stats, like you said, 43 yards. But if you look at when some of those yards came, it mattered, because 21-10 with 7, 8 minutes
they're
left,
still going to get the ball. Yeah, they're still going to get the ball twice.
Right. Yeah. And because of Bettis on that drive, they by the time they got the ball back, it was pretty much over. And like I said, that's one of those things that would never show up, because it's not the 75-yard run by Willie Parker. It's not, it's not a bunch of big plays, just a bunch of little grinding out yard plays, but it mattered.
Yeah, I mean, and like Ben wasn't that great, so there isn't like the only flashy play is that reverse pass by Hines Ward.
Yeah,
So,
yeah, but
yeah.
even Ben, made a few plays in that game too that mattered. It wasn't a pretty game. I've always said of all the games, I was fortunate enough to go to that game. Of all the games I've been to over the years, it's one of the worst football games I've ever like watched in terms of a football game. But it's also the greatest football game I've ever been to because
Yeah, they finally get over the hump. And that
yes,
was such a big thing for that team and Jerome Bettis. And like from 96 when he traded here, him and Cowher are like looking for this Super Bowl win. And that really was the coronation of his career. And it happened in his hometown, and everybody in Detroit kind of adopted the Steelers as the hometown team. And it was just great. It was great. I listed the next part as like the beloved moments. And there it just shows to like Jerome Bettis was such a key part. Like I think the team at some point did kind of take on his personality. And Bettis before the game in Detroit, like we sarcastically said about Jerome being from Detroit, because it just got so blown out. Like, oh, Jerome Bettis from Detroit. It was such an overhyped storyline. And he did receive the key to Detroit from a Super Bowl. I think it was Kwame Patrick or something. I don't know. That guy later got indicted on something. But he gave a key to Jerome Bettis. So, do you remember when Troy Polamalu had to wear a Notre Dame jersey?
yeah,
Because like Joey Porter, like to show some respect to Jerome Bettis, they all had him wear the green number. Was it number 6? Yeah. Jerome Bettis jersey. So, and that was like obviously a tribute to Jerome Bettis' Notre Dame career in college. So, in the aftermath of the 2004 AFC Championship game, it was devastating for me as a fan. I can't imagine what it was like for the players. And you could see it like in the aftermath. And we've covered this before where the whole team was just so let down. And it wasn't like it's such a difference from like when the triplets took over, when Bell and Brown and all them, like these guys wanted to win for each other. Like, and Hines Ward comes out and says, "Oh," and he cries on camera, literally cries on camera. Said, I'm just so disappointed that I wanted to win it more for Jerome than even myself," and that really shows how close that team had become and how tight knit they were. And the Ben, of course, being the rookie he is, promises Bettis a Super Bowl if he returns. And and Ben, like a true Hall of Famer, gets it done. So he has a great induction to the Hall of Fame, great speech. We'll have links to all this. And here's something kind of scary, Tim. He finished like what, 5th or 6th all time when
he was
finished
5th when he retired.
He retired, yeah. So it took him 5 years to get in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
Is that kind of crazy?
Yeah, I after what happened with Belichick not making the Hall of Fame, I can't explain the logic that goes into the Hall of Fame voting at this point. It makes very little sense.
Well, that was before the change. Like they made some change where you can only put in so many people. So I don't know. It's just like, and if you watch that speech, his Hall of Fame, he like thanks everybody. He even thanks Ben. It says, "Oh, thanks for making that tackle. I wouldn't be here if you wouldn't made that tackle on Nick Harper." So like, Jerome Bettis really just a really classy guy.
Yeah.
He ends up with 13,662 yards rushing, 91 rushing touchdowns. That was 5th all time at his retirement. I still think that's pretty good considering he never really played like Franco and the other guys. They played with like a really great quarterback. Like Jerome never really had a Hall of Fame quarterback until his last 2 seasons. So, what is his legacy? His best season, 96, 97. I don't know, 97 had 1,600 yards. 96 had 1,996, almost 2,000. Oh,
no, he had
1,400.
Yeah.
I'm misreading it. My brain's getting goofy. And 11 touchdowns. So, statistically, the 97 is your best season. 96 is the second best. But I think 96, he was a little more impactful maybe than 97, but
I agree, because in '96 that was the Mike Tomczak year. They switched from Jim Miller to Mike Tomczak. I think in '97 they had a little bit more of a passing game with
yeah,
Cordell in there, and then Cordell could run. '96, he was the offense,
yeah.
and teams were stacking guys in the box to stop him, and he still had a great season.
All right. All-time Steeler running backs for 100. Tim, where does he rank? I got Franco, Rocky, Jerome, Willie Parker, and I threw John Henry Johnson just for old-timey sake. I think he fits somewhere between Franco and Willie Parker. That would be.
I'd put him second behind Franco, honestly. I think he was.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Sanka behind Franco. That's.
Yeah, I think that's where I'd put him, and I know you're gonna wince at this, but I honestly would put Le'Veon Bell on that list somewhere too.
Why?
Because he was that good.
Whatever.
Like I said, I knew you were gonna wince at that.
If
you can take the who Le'Veon Bell was off, field out of it.
He never. I'll just go stick with on the field. He never won anything. Couldn't do anything in the playoffs.
Yeah. Fair.
I mean, whatever. Never paid. Never. I mean, Jerome Bettis is sitting here getting shot up, getting messed up shots. He got shots for broken ribs, and tried to play. Le'Veon Bell. I'm a little messed up today. I'm not going to play in this AFC Championship game.
Well, and that speaks to your point earlier about what if Bettis fumbles in that playoff game and doesn't win the Super Bowl? Then I wonder if we're still putting him second behind Franco.
Well. I mean, the stats, I don't know. I mean, Franco's still the best. It's tough to argue it. Willie Parker just didn't have enough longevity. And he was a different type of running back. He was not big, but
yeah.
Bettis averaged 3.9 yards per carry, which isn't great. I mean, it's good, but I don't know, Tim. Well, that's it for Jerome. I mean, I think, like we said, he definitely slots in right behind Franco and right ahead of Willie. And I don't think Le'Veon Bell maybe makes the top 10. I guess if we have to, sure.
Well, John Henry Johnson, I think that's another guy. You mentioned him. That was before all of our time.
Yeah, he wasn't here for a long time.
Right. So there was that too.
I guess neither. But I mean, how many years was Bell here? Like 5, 4.
Well, how many years was Willie Parker? Our running backs don't play that long.
Well, that's true.
That's the other thing about both Franco and Bettis.
They had really long careers.
They were both. Bettis was a decade as a Steeler, and then a couple of years as a Rams. Franco was 14 seasons as a Steeler, or 13, I can't remember. But
72 to when did they come?
83, so 12 seasons as a Steeler. But nevertheless, you don't see running backs play that long. So when you're evaluating a running back, you really are evaluating them on a short period of time.
Mm-hmm.
But those guys were the exceptions.
Yeah. So, and it's nice to have like the two classier guys at the top of the list.
It is nice to have that. And like you said, the average maybe being lower, some of that is playing that long. Right?
Well, yeah.
I mean, that's going to hurt your average when you play that many years. And again, Bettis late in his career was used in those short yardage situations. So it's only natural that his average is going to come down a little bit.
Yeah, I just can't. I don't know. That just like annoyed me so much when Bell did not play in that. Boy, yards per attempt.
I would have never known that.
Yeah, Le'Veon Bell averaged not 4 yards per attempt. I don't know if they're adding in the pass rush yards on that. And
Bell also caught a lot of balls out of the backfield. I mean, that's the other thing that made him dangerous. So
well, Bettis was never much of a pass catcher. So.
No, he wasn't. But
goodness gracious, he played like a bunch more years after that contract dispute.
Not quality years, but yes, he did.
2019 to 21, I guess, not as a bunch, but that's 2 or 3 years more. Well, that's enough. I like Jerome Bettis. If you like Jerome Bettis, see us on Facebook. Tell us about all your great Jerome Bettis stories. He ain't no head of lettuce, as Kobe said. And thanks for listening. Give us a great rating on whatever podcast service you listen to us, and check us out on Facebook. And as always, Tim's favorite website is Pittsburgh Sports Memories at Weebly.com. We'll see you next time, and catch you next time on Pittsburgh Sports Memories.